mysteriously, this ended up in my feed. I don't know. It's like I was, my name is James Kozier. I live in Darlington Township in Beaver County, Western Pennsylvania. And I captured from here the massive fallout from the massive illegal burn off of at least 34 to 38 railroad containers that Norfolk Southern illegally burnt off on the Pennsylvania border, with all of the winds blowing into Pennsylvania. There's radar and satellite imagery to back that up, the irrefutable evidence that all of it ended up in and onto Pennsylvanians. But I captured the video of that evidence of them burning off containers on the tracks in Pennsylvania on the 5th of February 2023, and I captured several videos. I captured video the day before as well, on the 4th, of them burning off containers. The 4th, the 5th, and then on the 6th, I captured the massive fallout of millions of pounds of carcinogenic industrial chemicals from their massive. They did like a illegal cleanup. Everything that was left of all the containers involved in the derailment. Norfolk Southern, working with the Ohio authorities and federal authorities, they burnt off everything that was left on the site. And they didn't do the proper research that they needed to do because they were trying to keep it so secret, keeping a small circle of people. But there was one expert on hazardous materials. His name is Sil Sagano, the fire chief from the Youngstown Fire Department. The Honorable Sil Sagano, Fire Chief Sagano, went on to Channel 27 Youngstown News on the evening of the 5th of February, the night before they did the massive burn off. And he said that the chemicals were so dangerous. He said that they were deadly. He said that in their state of being particles from being burnt, he said that those are carcinogenic. And he said he had models even that he had with the particulates, an account of particulates, how deadly they were. How we're talking carcinogens, though, is what I'm saying. And he was trying to warn those corporate entities that were doing the illegal burn off, working with our authorities, not to do it. Not to do. He must have gotten word, and they didn't heed his words. They didn't listen because he was saying that the chemicals, not only were they that dangerous, he said, but that they would have a tendency to collect water molecules and get heavy and then fall. And that's what you see in the videos that I captured on the 6th. You can see those massive smoke, carcinogenic, industrial, chemical laden smoke clouds. They're dragging on the ground at like 2 to 3 miles per hour through western Pennsylvania, heading east. Thousands of people got dosed with those chemicals, and it was all kept secret. I even captured the media, WTAE, Channel 4 Action News. They were there where I captured the fallout of all those chemicals at the junction of Route 51 and 168. They were there, and they never aired any footage. They never sounded the alarm, as is nobody did. There was a blackout as far as nobody said anything. Must have been a directive that Norfolk Southern or the Ohio authorities, I don't know, sent out to all of the media to not give anyone a chance to even tape up their windows and doors to mitigate the contamination, because it ended up being a multi-billion-dollar disaster in western Pennsylvania, and they were just hiding it because it would have cost them so much money. And they positioned everything in East Palestine, but never was there ever a wind that ever blew contamination into East Palestine, or Ohio for that matter. It's all on radar and satellite imagery. There is a history of what I just said, irrefutable evidence to back that up. But they positioned it all in East Palestine, and that's where they reported on everything in safety, and that's where the firemen stood in safety as well, because they were told to not put out the fires when they arrived there, on the evening of the 3rd, that Friday, that February 3rd, 2023. So the firemen just stood back to the back of everything, and the wind to their backs as they watched the containers being burnt off illegally. Norfolk Southern had contractors that burnt everything off illegally. Of course, no one said anything, and even to this day, three years later, no one has courage to ever use the word illegal or criminal in context with what was done. Thousands of people in Pennsylvania were contaminated to whatever degree with that cocktail of industrial strength, like carcinogens, chemicals. This really happened. But why I bring this up, why I bring that up in context with this, uh, uh, well, the thing is, I was monitored and I was surveilled, so that I could never get any traction with the videos that I captured. There wasn't, you can't find a report about the massive fallout here in Pennsylvania because everything was covered up. And they wanted to make sure that my videos didn't get any traction. They even screen grabbed them because I put them up on Twitter. Now my Twitter account did stay up for a while, but then they did kill my Twitter account and my TikTok and my YouTube. They did that, but at first they didn't because they wanted to see if I had more footage. As they monitored me, they wanted to see what more I was going to release. But they had the valve closed off on me. I couldn't get anything out to anybody. But being monitored, having my civil liberties stomped upon. I was just trying to help in the beginning. I was just reaching out, asking questions like, is there anything that can be given to, the thousands of people that got exposed to this cocktail of industrial carcinogens? Is there anything that can be done to mitigate what might affect their health, and to stave off cancer, what have you? Is there anything that can be done? I was asking these questions, even in Norfolk Southern. I was reaching out to everybody. I never could get anyone who would even return, talk to me. And I reached out to everyone, every authority, from local authorities all the way up to the Biden administration and then the Trump administration. I mean, every stop, every link in the chain. And I never could get anything from everyone. It's like no one will touch the issue. Everyone is afraid, or what? Just so corrupt. I don't know. Whatever. But I had the governor's ear, Governor Shapiro. He was hanging on my every word for a while, and I was championing him to do the right thing, to bring the perpetrators to justice. To represent the victims here in Pennsylvania. He was the governor of Pennsylvania, still is. He shouldn't be. For what he's done, he should probably be in jail along with Governor DeWine, the Ohio governor, who declared the false state of emergency to activate our guard to keep people out from capturing the preparations that were made for the massive burn off on the 6th. Because they went in there and put out the fires that they said they could get nowhere near. Because like I said, the firemen were told to not put out the fires, but they were used as props. Every time the media would report on what was going on for 3 days over there in East Palestine, which is where they reported on everything from. Because of the actual derailment and the fires were on the Pennsylvania border, on the outskirts of East Palestine. Not in East Palestine, on the outskirts, east of East Palestine. But, I should go back just for a moment and let I mentioned that I captured the Norfolk Southern burning off containers, railroad containers, there on the tracks in Pennsylvania. I did that both Saturday and Sunday. But Sunday I sent out the videos to every media outlet that I could think of. Everyone. I didn't realize that they were working with those corporations. I was naive to that. I had heard people use, nomenclature. That's the wrong way to say it, but how they corporate media. In reference to just what thought was a free and independent press. But the fact, what I understand from what happened with the media, they were under the directive of the corporations, because I captured WTAE, Channel 4 Action News, there in the video on the 6th of February. They were there and they never aired the footage. Now, it took me a couple of days to realize that they hadn't done that. Because of the generation I was raised in, we had like 12 or 13 channels growing up. And we depended upon, there was a trust. We trusted the news outlet, the television stations in Pittsburgh and Youngstown, to tell us, that there was a hurricane or a tornado. Or we didn't have the Weather Channel then. We had local news that would let us know, if there was something wrong. Certainly, this massive contamination, this massive burn off and fallout of all of these carcinogenic industrial chemicals should have been something that they blew the whistle, and would have alerted people, so they could have had a choice to evacuate or to shelter in place, tape up their windows and doors to mitigate the contamination. And I had mentioned that I had reached out to everyone, authorities and everything. I'm like, is there anything that can be done? Because the manufacturers of the chemicals, I'm like, if there's an accident in a factory, I'm sure that they have protocols that they use. So I'm like, is there anything that can be given to these people? Thousands of people here in PA that were left oblivious to be contaminated. Now, getting back to the preparations, I talked about Governor DeWine. I captured footage on Sunday afternoon. I'm sorry, I have to go into this for a minute. Bear with me on this. There's a reason. You'll know here in a moment. Look, I'm going to tell you all about it here in just a moment. But the thing is that when I sent that footage out of them burning off railroad containers on the tracks in Pennsylvania, that I captured on the 5th that afternoon, someone from the media must have had told them at the command center where they were managing the illegal burn off in East Palestine. I was told later that even they had sent the cops out to detain me from a local fireman. He told me this. My cousin, he is in the fire department here in Darlington Township, Pennsylvania. He told me that when I was up there capturing that on the 5th of that Sunday afternoon, they had sent out. You see, there was media, Channel 2 or 21 came out to where I was capturing that. They saw me on this, it's like a Route 51 where it goes over the railroad tracks there in Pennsylvania, where I was capturing that. They sent out the media, and I didn't realize it at the time. I know this sounds so discombobulated. Try to follow me, but this was Sunday afternoon. There was a media that came out there, and they weren't there to capture anything. It was so curious because they didn't have their cameras out or nothing. They were just looking at me. And I said, where's your camera and everything? I said, this camera I've got, I said, it's got a good zoom. I said, it's an amateur camera, but it will work for us. I'll give you the footage. And I went down on the tracks to get another perspective. And when I came up, they were gone. Now, why I say this, you see, because you see that media that came out there the day before, they were in on it. I'm saying all of the media knew that the contamination was going into Pennsylvania, but they all kept it quiet. You can't find one report. If there was a criminal grand jury, which there should be, but if there wasn't, if our local, state, and federal governments weren't so corrupt, they would investigate this properly. We'd find out that there was a directive that went out to all the media, and that they're all complicit in the massive cover-up of this. Thousands of people being left oblivious to be contaminated. We don't know what that's going to look like 10, 15 years from now, how those carcinogens are going to, in which way, manifest. And I'm sorry to go off on another tangent, but I'll come back to this point. But 3 years after this has happened, now the Trump administration has given $10 million to research firms that are going to be working in East Palestine, it said, to monitor what types of disease crops up. But I can tell you right now, listen to what I'm telling you, please. All of the contamination blew into Pennsylvania, not Ohio, not East Palestine. So even the Trump administration, they are continuing the nailing down the narrative, the lying narrative of East Palestine, keeping Pennsylvania out of everyone's mouth. The $10 million that has been given, federal money given to research firms that are going to be investigating, monitoring, seeing what kind of disease crops up. Really, this has turned out to be, like a big experiment now. But they'll be watching the people in Pennsylvania secretly. Like that's who they're going to be monitoring. Because the people in East Palestine, they just, if they got a trace of it, because I'll tell you what these evil corporations did. They put chemicals into a stream running through East Palestine and then used these aerators that agitated the water violently and made it like mystified it so that there would be chemical traces in East Palestine. I got the video of that too, by the way. When they evacuated everyone, they did that. They brought in aerators to put it in a stream. The stream doesn't run parallel to where the tracks were. It's a separate stream even. You see, the reason why they did that, and please hear me, is because independent research firms, whatever, that come into East Palestine wouldn't find any trace of the chemicals if they hadn't have done that. You see, they want there to be a trace of the chemicals. You understand? So they can keep the narrative nailing it down East Palestine, where you're not going to find the cancer clusters because it all went in. I'm talking about millions of pounds of contamination went onto Pennsylvania. Like I said, the chemicals had properties by which the particles attracted water molecules and they got heavy. And when that shit disappears off of the radar, it's because it's on the ground. It all fell out. It didn't dissipate up into the atmosphere. It was disposed of, but the disposal is on the ground, in the soil, in the streams, like it did rain twice within a month here in Pennsylvania, where, we got heavy contamination. And both times, you could smell and taste the chemicals. I was symptomatic, for at least a month, severely so for nearly a week. My symptoms from the exposure I got was that I had this like headache. First thing was like kind of headache where you can't move, without pain. I had a burning in my chest. I had a cough. I had fatigue, the kind of fatigue where you have a tough time just getting out of bed. But I had to get out of bed because I had such serious diarrhea from the contamination. Another way that it affected me is that my body was very cold. I'm not talking about like cold from being outside in the cold. It was a different cold. It was down to my core, and it was from the chemicals. So I know that people did get dosed with some shit that is bad. This happened to me personally, so I know. I'm a man of faith. I wasn't afraid. You understand what I'm saying? I've been through a hell of a lot worse in my lifetime without going to the emergency room. I wasn't leaving the house. And the thoughts of getting up and going anywhere, because I was so fatigued, I was so sick, I couldn't have done it anyway. And that's the truth. What I'm saying is true. Now, let me get back to where I was. Hold on a moment. I covered a lot on that circuitous little tangent, didn't I? I just want to interject this too. Governor Shapiro, they were monitoring me. His office was monitoring me. They trampled on my civil liberties as well. They had surveillance technology they used along with the federal government. It really happened. Another thing that was done is that the obfuscation is that my footage was screen grabbed. I was trying to say something, but I went on to something else. My footage that I put up on TikTok immediately, it's all time stamped on cellular video. It was screen grabbed and was reposted onto TikTok, and they used promotion so that it got thousands and thousands of hits. But the heading on it was Darlington, Ohio, which is, I don't know how many it's 100 miles to the west, and that none of the contamination went to the west of the Pennsylvania border. It didn't go into Ohio, but it was just a way to obfuscate. I don't know if Joe Rogan got that footage or if he got the stuff off of my TikTok account, but he never asked my permission, or did he talk to me, about the footage before he then featured it on his podcast. The thing about Joe Rogan is that he only showed one of my videos, my initial reaction. He didn't show the video with WTAE, Channel 4 Action News. That's the one that would have blown everything up. If he would have shown that on his podcast, then it would have forced the Biden administration to go ahead, and they would have had to have opened up, a full case on it. It would have been something, there would have been a criminal grand jury. I'm talking about the Joe Rogan experience. That podcast was the most popular podcast in our nation at that time. Now, that being said, Joe Rogan, he never asked my permission. He showed the footage on his podcast with someone on his podcast who kept saying, they had to do it. He was talking about the burn off, which they never had to do it. Now as soon as I'm going to go back to that point in just a moment. This is extemporaneous. I don't have any points here, to follow. I'm sorry about this. Give me just a moment. But Joe Rogan, you have to ask yourself, why did he do it? Because, why wouldn't he have mention of Pennsylvania and have somebody on his podcast who kept saying, oh, they had to do it. You see, the thing is that they didn't have to do it. Those fires could have been put out that evening when the derailment first happened. There are special firefighting teams at the Pittsburgh or Cleveland airport. That's just 40 minutes away, Pittsburgh, and Cleveland's maybe an hour and a half, if that. The way they'd haul ass to get here, I don't know. It's close. But even the chemical companies that Norfolk Southern was hauling the chemicals for, they have special firefighting teams. And I don't know about the local firefighters here, except that they were told to not put out the fires, and they stood and were used as props for the media to report on it, to make it look like they were trying to put out the fires. That was a lot that I just said right there. You might want to go ahead and rewind, or whatever. Go back and listen to this again, because I know this sounds wild, but everything I've said is absolutely true. That's the thing about it. This is absolutely true, what I'm telling you. I didn't mention this, but I sent a note with the footage that I captured of them burning off containers that Sunday afternoon that I sent out to the media. I sent a note with the footage to each and every one of the news affiliates, CBS, NBC, CNN, Fox, all of them. Everyone I could think of in the alphabet. I sent the footage out to. And with it, I had this note to accompany it, and that was from someone that was raised on a farm here in western Pennsylvania. Just an average person, just doesn't know. I don't know anything about these railroad cars. But I said, listen, what if these fires, that are burning, these containers, what if they get hot, they're hot, and they empty out, and they suck oxygen into them and then explode? I said, can that happen? Now that was what I said. Can it happen? Could they explode? Well, within 2 hours of my sending out the footage to the media, Governor DeWine declares a false state of emergency. And here's what they came out with a lie. They said there is one container that pressure is building up on. It's not. They said there's a pressure release valve that's not working, and it's building up pressure. And they said they have to go in and let the pressure off. Nobody said anything about burning anything off, like doing anything like that. They said there was one container and they called it a controlled release. They said this when Governor DeWine declared a false state of emergency. He activated our Army National Guard, actually to keep people like me out of there, so that the preparations that were made for the massive burn off of everything that was left of at least 34 containers of hazardous material, railroad containers. How many millions and millions of pounds of this shit we're talking about? You know, good Lord. But the preparations, are this. They would have to go in there and put out the fires that they said they could get nowhere near. I mean, they've been reporting on it for 3 days, and it makes it look like they're trying to fight these fires, having the firemen used as props. I'm telling you the truth. When I say that those firemen, each and every one of those firemen that went there to, responded, the first responders, they are acutely aware of where the smoke is going, no matter what kind of fire, especially a chemical fire where you're dealing with carcinogenic industrial chemicals. They knew where the hell all of that we're talking. If you look at the footage from the night of the derailment fires, there is footage. You can see that those, not only can you see how massive the fire is, but you look at the radar. Now, if you look where East Palestine is, and then you look at a map that covers like the whole east, all the way to Pittsburgh, what have you, that you can see the smoke. Now we're talking about carcinogenic carcinogenic chemicals, laden smoke. That's what it is. It's poison. It's carcinogens. You can see it on radar all the way down, in truth, to Aliquippa. Now you look at the distance from East Palestine to Pittsburgh. Aliquippa is like halfway to Pittsburgh. How much of it went further without, having like the evidence that you'd see with the particulates? There might have been other chemicals that went all the way to Pittsburgh. We don't know. Now, if it would have been all black all the way to Pittsburgh, they might have made something of it. You know what I'm saying? I'm just guessing at, because I mean, with even these firemen who knew where the smoke was going, they've got family, they've got friends in Pennsylvania. Man, half of them, I mean, those that responded, the fire departments were, most of them were here in Pennsylvania because it happened on the Pennsylvania border. So even the firemen that knew that their family and their friends were being contaminated, they still kept their mouths shut. You'd ask yourself why they would do that. Do you have the answer? Why would they keep their mouths shut? Well, I was told that they did receive at least $70,000 apiece, the firemen. That was like a radius. You see, they have a radius silencing settlement that they only are basing it on 5 containers, y'all. Just 5 containers. I opted out of everything, and I had to argue with my wife about it. She opted out. We opted out of it. We have no part of any lawsuit, nothing. Okay, I'll come back to this, but I couldn't help but do that because, look, you might hear me use expletives, but you best believe I am a work in Christ. I am a repentant sinner in Jesus' name. I'm a work in Christ, a tiny, tiny, tiny I am. I am a work in Christ. And I couldn't see it any other way except that it was appointed for me to capture, the fallout and everything, and to release everything like I did. That this whole matter would be brought out into the open, You see, they were trying to hide everything, that they were acting like nothing even happened in Pennsylvania. But Pennsylvania was, in fact, where their disaster is and was. It wasn't Ohio. You see what I'm saying? Look, with everything I've said, anyone could drive to where the derailment occurred, and you'll see that you can throw a stone from the border sign, Ohio Pennsylvania border sign, and you'll hit the derailment site with a rock. It's right there. It's right there. Okay. Then you look at the radar, you look at the satellite imagery, the history, and you see that everything that I've said is true. All of the winds are blowing to the east. All of that contamination blew into Pennsylvania, not Ohio. I'm talking about the whole 3-day event. Even the day that you see the plume, that everyone knows about the plume because it was polarized. They used that, as a really big time, If you think about it, the heat of those fires, it carried all that shit up to whatever height it would go, as the winds were then pushing it all into Pennsylvania. So even that day, the particulates didn't fall out in Ohio. They fell out in Pennsylvania. That whole, whatever was misting, whatever there was from the particulates, burning the shit, it went up fast and went up with the heat. And the wind then carried it at that altitude over, and then it just fell. It got heavy because it attracted water molecules, the particulates did, and it came down. So the whole event, this whole disaster, is a Pennsylvania disaster that was positioned in East Palestine, Ohio, so that these corporations could save what would be multi-billions of dollars. Because Pennsylvania is rural, but there's a lot of agriculture here too. There would have been a lot of properties that would have the property value even now. What would these properties be worth? You know what I mean? What would it cost to subsidize all of the farmers that either grow things or raise cattle, chicken, hogs, whatever? All of those animals would have had to have been put to death, culled, C-U-L-L-E-D. They would have had to have been destroyed. They shouldn't have gone to market, but they did. And so did everything that they grew, because they didn't stop anybody from growing and harvesting that year. So all that went to market. That was all it was sent out to consumers. People ingested those chemicals, those carcinogens. They ate the fruits of those carcinogens. They ate it from either the eggs that they bought, the chickens, the hogs, the cattle, the soybean that they grew, everything. I mean, nobody did anything about that. It all went to market, everyone. So you may have how many people got ingested those carcinogens that way. Look, 2 times it rained within a month, and both times I could smell and taste the chemicals just like it was by right there, the derailment off of Taggart Road on the outskirts of East Palestine, whatever. We're talking about a cocktail of carcinogens. Now, the court in northeastern Ohio is carrying what is the silencing settlement that the Senator Doug Mastriano from Pennsylvania, he went over there to East Palestine. And it looked like he was doing something heroic, because he said, it wasn't 1 container, it was 5. So then initially everyone's like, wow, you're great. You're great, Senator Mastriano, telling the truth. But folks, the AP, Associated Press, they reported what Norfolk Southern told them the morning after the derailment, even on the 4th of February 2023. They said that there were 14 tankers of vinyl chloride and 20 other containers that were labeled as carrying hazardous materials. That was 34. Initially, like I said, though, it turned out, I didn't know if I did say this, but The Hill reported this year, not this year, but last year in 2025, that it was 38 containers of hazardous materials that they illegally burned off. Of course, The Hill didn't say illegal, or either did the AP, but Doug Mastriano is the one that planted with his trusted authority. He used it, abused his authority, helping those corporations probably to see what they're going to help him, with whatever he wants to do politically, help him with his next campaign or something. I conjecture, but he put that into the court in northeastern Ohio. Why is Ohio carrying this? Because the weight of corruption, is really the Ohio authorities. That's that these corporations would rather work with, those people, what I mean, over there who have already been really steeped, in corruption. They've contaminated them with the corruption, with the lies, with the criminality. So it's a radius settlement, is what I'm getting at. Doug Mastriano, he set the number in there. He came from over here from Pennsylvania, went over there to East Palestine, and said there was some kind of a talk over there. They had officials together, and he came out. It was all staged, and most dummies. If you don't know, I'm saying if I didn't know, I'd be a dummy too. I'm not saying I'm smarter than anyone. I could have been left in the dark. It just so happens that I know. I know what happened. But I'd have been just as dumbed down as everyone else. You think, well, you'd trust that senator from Pennsylvania. Hell, he's from Pennsylvania. He'd have to be telling the truth because he's over there representing PA constituents in Pennsylvania. But Doug Mastriano, he lied for those corporations. That number 5, that's all they're basing, this on, with their silencing settlements, that they're, their radius settlements. Now the people to the west, half of the people named in their silencing settlements, they're just really being paid to carry the lie of the 5 containers. Or to even say that they got contaminated because they didn't. It's all a lie. It's done to obfuscate, to redirect, to take attention off of Pennsylvania. I mean, when all of the contamination went into it, in reality, has gone into Pennsylvania. If you have, you use the authorities and make it look like, it's a radius kind of like event. You know what I mean? Pretty disgusting. Oh, I don't know that I know I've been all over the place here. I just wonder if what I said, I don't have to go back to, I'm not sure, but I talked about them going in there when they had looked at the video that they captured and sent out to the media, and they read my note and they made up that story. They probably read my note where I said, what if, the containers get empty and then suck oxygen into them and they're hot and it explode. They probably read that and said, you know what? If that dummy believes it, probably everybody would. Norfolk Southern probably has experience, and they've done this before in various, derailments across the nation, where they've used local authorities to block off an area and they burnt containers off. You could probably find cancer clusters, by looking at on the radar to see where the winds went after those derailments from wherever it was that they had fires, on the sites of the derailments. You probably could find out that there were people, that ended up getting sick, and suffering and dying from contamination elsewhere. Yeah. But I have to emphasize, that I was monitored, and I had FBI agents that came out to talk to me from the Biden administration. They indicated that they had seen the Joe Rogan um, piece. But, on the Joe Rogan piece, where Joe Rogan shows my footage without ever asking me about it or asking my permission, they don't mention Pennsylvania. I did hear after the Biden administration had seen my footage, I presume they came out, the EPA, I'm saying, his administration came out and they said, we hear you in Darlington Township. We hear you, we see you. He was talking to me. I captured the video and, whoever else they would think was with me. I'm alone, Nobody, even in this town, they're all so cowardice. All I'm seeing is an epidemic of that kind of phenomena where people turtle up. They're afraid to even talk about it. I even say to people, I'm like, why in the hell aren't you fighting for more? All you're getting out of this is what they say from 5 containers. I said it was at least 34 containers, and all of it went over here. I said they're paying you, 1/6, 1/7, 1/6, 1/7 the amount that they should be paying you. Why are you settling with 5 containers? People are afraid to stand up to these corporations, to the authorities. It's really something. I never thought that anything like this was possible, that people would be so cowardice. And I understand it. I'm not saying I'm some kind of courageous character, but I mean, I've been a coward before in my life. I have shame from not standing up and helping somebody when I should have, and I know what it feels like. I know what it feels like to be a coward. There's a lot more. There's a lot more I could say about this matter, over here with what was done. Still, nobody talks about Pennsylvania. You know, I did mention some things here, but let me now put together what it is, why it is we were talking. I came in on this subject of using insects as vectors, to spread disease, like pathogens in a far as a biological warfare application. If I can use that kind of word, use those words for this, but you see, I'm a 2 branch veteran. I started my service in the Army National Guard, and then I wanted to go regular, full time, but I didn't want the Army, so I wanted to go in the Air Force. That's what I did. I was a career airman, then I went in the Air Force. I served honorably. I served our nation honorably with distinction. The thing is that after a while being monitored, surveilled so tight, I had the governor's ear, and I asked him about what I'm going to say. I want to share with you, and then I asked the Biden administration, and I sent a lot of pleas to the Trump administration. I've been really, really trying to get some help from them. With no answer from them, no answer from anybody. But I said what my request was. It was simple. I said, look, I said my civil liberties have been stomped upon. I couldn't get any of this out to anyone, even people, let them know, even here in Pennsylvania, the thousands of people that got dosed that don't even know it. I said, maybe you could do me a favor. I said, and drop the formality, just as you dropped, there was no formalities with my being surveilled, my civil liberties being crushed, my being suffocated, like that, stepped on. Here's the thing. When I was, my service started off in the Army National Guard. I had quit school. I had left home. I quit school. Situation at home was my parents had come into money, and I was raised in a working poor stratum of society on a farm out in the country, and there was someone that liked my mom and my dad, and they left them some money. They left our family some money, and I wasn't a part of their plans. I got to see how money changes people and can affect people, and my mom and dad, everybody's gone now, but my sister. But you know, um, I loved my mom and dad dearly. I miss them. I think about them all the time. But money. I wasn't in their plans. As they were uh, buying up shit. Having horses. Like they buy a horse trailer, a big horse trailer, and a inboard. A boat and a motor home and a sawmill. They wanted to have their own business and shit. Doing all kinds of shit. They're just buying all kinds of shit. But I was nowhere in their plans. And I was like, it was kind of disgusting to see. And I had left home. And I'm like, well, this ain't going to work out leaving home. I'm like, oh, shit. What am I going to do? So I said, why don't I join the Guard and then have me gone for a while. I come back and we'll go from there. At least we'll get, I was like, okay. I'm like, I was all about it. It was okay. But the thing is, I'm going to share something with you that's going to really blow your mind, or maybe not. The thing is, this is the testimony that I gave to two administrations now, asking them to drop their formality and help me to get a fair and just result from what was done to me when I served our nation with honor and distinction. What was done to me. Now you see, I think because I was a high school dropout, that's why I was flagged and used in what was a secret virus program. It made sense to me. I was given this bonus for this MOS that was the dumbest, MOS. Like, why would I be given a bonus? Anyway, that's one thing that was curious to me. But let me tell you what happened. There I am. I had to get my GED while I was, going through training at Fort Jackson, South Carolina, 1983. I went through training when our Marines were killed in Beirut. That's when my cycle was going through training. I went through the basic training in the same barracks that my uncle Bobby went through basic training. The very same barracks atop of Tank Hill. The same barracks. Isn't that amazing? He went to Vietnam and he got exposed to Agent Orange and got eaten up with bone cancer. He died. But we both went through basic training in the same barracks, even atop of Tank Hill at Fort Jackson. So I'm in the shot line. We go through immunizations. They separated me and a few other guys out of the immunizations, and I was like, I had this adrenaline hit because I'm like, why are you separating us out of here? Now we were all getting the same shots. We all get the same shots. I knew that. Yeah, I was smart enough, to realize it was more than just smart. I was given like a quickening, and I only a few times in my life have I had a serious adrenaline spike, and that was one of them right then. And I asked the nurse that was doing the prep in the line, like the, oh my goodness, hold on, excuse me. I've got a medical condition other than my disabilities from what happened to me in the Air Force. I had something I'm going to share with you, and it's acting up right now. Again, I'm going through a bit of a bout with this retrovirus. The thing is, I've been fighting this for all these years, 43 years, without health care, a lot of times using horse, like veterinary antibiotics and ciprofloxacin, you use for fish and whatever I can get my hands on, trying to, and whatever Z packs I can squeeze out of making a deal with somebody to barter, all kinds of shit like that through the years. Bactrim, uh, was always something that was kind of harsh but worked. But the thing is, in this shot line, I had an adrenaline hit, and I asked the nurse that was prepping for the shots in the line, I said, why, what is going on here? And she looked at me like she had such pity for me. She knew something about what was going on. We all got so sick, man. We barely made it through boot camp. I was just, I'm telling you, it was just, there was no way that I was going to be recycled. And I suppose that's what it was with the other guys too. And we were all guardsmen. And, oh shit, man. It was bad. I'd never been so sick, and I was healthier than I'd ever been in my life. Stronger than ever. And then when we went on to, here, let me share this. Those barracks that I went through training in, we were the last cycle to go through those barracks. They were torn out right after we were done. I think it was done for some type of a safety precaution and protocol with, the type of experiment that they conducted with those pathogens. Now, initially, I didn't see, anyone else, like the contagion with it wasn't, like you didn't see it, with the other guys that were there. Just us that were injected with the shit got, really sick. But here's the thing about whatever designer pathogen that they injected us with. When we went to AIT, at Fort Gordon, Georgia, there they purposely put me in a bay with 7 other guys. And I was so sick, man. I'm telling you in truth, I don't remember my training at Fort Gordon, Georgia. All I remember is how sick I was. And I remember that there were these like Puerto Ricans or all Spanish speaking soldiers, young kids that were, they hardly could speak English, that were there in that bay that I was in. All 7 of those guys that were in that bay with me were taken away. They got that sick. So it was highly contagious, whatever they gave me. Like it was designed, I guess. I'm guessing at this because we didn't have like as sick as I was through boot camp, not everybody got that shit. It was just the people that were injected. It seemed to me, I was like, man, look at this. I knew something was up, man, from the time we were separated into that line. But yeah, it's everyone that was in the bay that I was in at Fort Gordon, they were taken away. I never saw them again. They were, I'm guessing they were hospitalized. They were so sick. I was sick. I should have been, I'm saying I was so sick I should have been hospitalized. And it wasn't just in that bay. And I don't know how many guys, it wasn't just me. Was it just me? Was I the Typhoid Mary? Was that what, what I'm saying? Was it just me, or was there several guys there that were there for, from Fort Gordon? Because the, I guess that would be a training brigade, battalion, I don't know, battalion there that I was in at Fort Gordon. The battalion commander came out and he gave us, he's out there, he's like, gargle with salt water. He's like telling everyone, because everybody, it seems, was sick. But the ones that I was with personally in that bay, they were all taken away. I saw that, like, they're gone. And I don't know if it was if I'm the reason solely, or if there were other guys. Honestly. So when I got to when I got back to Newcastle, Pennsylvania, that's where my battalion, the 229th Field Artillery Battalion, that was my home. I told my CO, I told our first sergeant, I was like, man, I'm telling you, they injected me with something, and then we had to go back for other shots too. I'm saying they gave me something, and I said, I don't know what the hell it is. And they weren't interested in anything I had to say about it. Nobody was. The thing is that I was strong, and it's like what I've learned about this what was flagged as a retrovirus, because when I did finally have some health care, I was able to get blood drawn then. I'm talking about civilian realm, my wife's health care, and it's a retrovirus. It's what it's flagged as. My wife has never gotten it. She's never gotten sick from me. We've been together 33 years. So, when it's even bad with me, when it flares up, like I can tell each and every time the symptoms were the same. I was just the same as when how I was going through training, being sick. Like it goes into like walking pneumonia, powerful, horrible bronchitis, and then walking pneumonia. It goes it goes into a bacterial infection. It's viral though. So, going and when I went through when I was still in the guard, we went to our 2-week drill at Fort Pickett, Virginia. And would you believe, there, they instructed us. Now we're getting to what I was talking about with this vector. Using insects as a vector. In a biological warfare. Program, whatever, as a weapon to weaponize how to distribute, to how to infect. What like how would you do this? Like how would you using vectors is what you would use. My sugar must be low. Excuse me. But they told us to strip down nude, like in a buddy system, and strip down nude, and on the hour count the ticks that were on us. So they at Fort Pickett they were again using using guardsmen there, to test out whatever vector they had dumped in there, to see if it would how well it would work out. Isn't that something on what I'm telling you? I knew that after what was done to me, getting injected with that shit at Fort Jackson, I was like, I knew, like, I'm like, you know what, they said they gave us a bottle of insect repellent. They're like, we want to see how well the repellent works. And I looked at that and I'm like, you gotta be fucking kidding me. You're so full of shit. I know full well this ain't about the goddamn insect repellent. This is about the fucking ticks. You know what I'm saying? Anyway, it was disgusting. That's why I didn't want to go regular Army. But I did want to go regular, and I went Air Force. They wanted a high school diploma, and it was wild because I found out that I only needed 4 credits. I was amazed because I quit. I thought in my junior year, but anyway, correspondingly, I ended up getting the same diploma as if I would have graduated with my class. So, it looks like I'm a high school graduate. That's what I am. I am a high school graduate. So I was able to do it correspondingly with four credits. Hallelujah, in Jesus' name. So that's what I went in the Air Force. Now hear me on this. I brought this up. I testified to this, and I'm like, hey, I said there was no formality with my civil liberties being stomped upon. I said, can you help me to get a fair and just result for what was done to me being used as a test subject in a secret virus program? I said, can you help me with this? Can I see some compensation from this? I said, drop the formality. You have done, I'm sure, a thorough background check on me. Not only did I capture this Fallout video, this multi-billion-dollar irrefutable evidence of the criminality of Norfolk Southern and, the complicitness with the authorities that were involved in that to cover up, the contamination and allow thousands of people to remain oblivious intentionally because they didn't want to have to pay, for the damages. And then what now you have is criminal. It's criminal now, man. It's totally criminal. Criminal. And I said maybe you can help me to get a fair and just result. Now hear me on this, because you're going to wonder why I asked for, what I've asked for with a fair and just result, because there's more. With my service in the Air Force, um, I was I ended up getting the job I wanted because they were going to make me a security cop, and my training would have been at Lackland. That's where that's where you stay, and it's the gateway at Lackland Air Force Base for the Air Force, but it's also where you would train to be a security cop, to be the Air Force Police. And I had a portfolio together, as a graphic illustrator, and I wanted to be that for the Air Force. I wanted to serve as a graphic illustrator. And my training instructor, one of them, I'm sorry I don't remember his name, even though I can remember my two drill sergeants from Army, Sergeant Bass and Sergeant Canady. Bass was a junior, Canady was a senior, and Bass knew something was going on with us when we got sick, by the way. I don't know what he knew, but you could tell because he was merciful with us, that were so sick. But I didn't remember the training, the guys the training instructors, the Air Force, but those guys they were so great, man. One of them, he was so decent. He let me go, and for an interview, he set it up for me with my portfolio, which was really just so cool. I showed him my portfolio, and he did that for me. I was so grateful, and I got it. Matter of fact, my Air Force picture, I missed out on getting my picture, with my squadron, because I was, at administration, being interviewed. It was amazing. And at that interview, do you know that there was a guy that I went through Army basic, a guy that was there, the same kind of situation. He had gone active Air Force, and he was in the Guard, went through the same training cycle I did. I can't remember his name. He might have then had the virus. He would as well. I'm telling you the truth. Not only did I meet up with that guy there at Lackland, that I can't at the moment think of his name, but when I went to Altus Air Force Base, he ended up being stationed there too. So miraculous. That guy is, I wonder, he probably was injected in line with me as well. He was quite a comedian. I can't think of his name. But anyway, I went on to Altus Air Force Base from, that was my first duty assignment. My squadron, though, my command was at Lackland, the 1365th Audiovisual Squadron. Now, being an audiovisual, being what my work there at Altus was everything uh, from doing the graphics in simulators, for pilots, for the aircraft and military airlift command and SAC and TAC. We did it all. We could have a part. We did have a part in different jobs that way, because we were in service to them all. But also we would put together briefings, whether it was on 35 millimeter or view graphs, where you have briefings, any briefing, we're talking about some, you yes, that no matter what the briefing is, you're going to need some visuals. You know what I mean? Like, you can, that's, it's interesting, isn't it? The kind of work that, you as a graphic illustrator that you would do in there. But it also designed military crests, like organizational crests, like stuff like that as a designer. I was a specialist as a lettering artist. So I would hand letter calligraphy, like that kind of chancery cursive calligraphy, like citations and retirement certificates. But we do a lot, you name it, anything that's visual, audio, visual, we would have work brought into us, to communicate, it was a great job. And listen, from the time I got there though, it wasn't sweet early on. What happened was, is I had a boss, my NCO IC. His name was Stanley Beauchamp, and he was like, you know, um, imagine the most Malcolm X kind of like prejudiced black man you've ever met, but then go ahead and give him like a street, more of a street attitude, where he even would talk about killing whites, killing white people. That's how bad he was, and that's the kind of things that he would say. Um, my first dealing with him was he separated me from everybody in my job and put me in this area in the upstairs in the attic, and I didn't have any equipment or anything. And I was told by people were telling me, they're like, hey, this guy, he's really sadistic. People in the unit who I was not brought in with, like I was separated from everybody. Not, and they said he thinks he's some kind of he's psychoanalyzing you. He's taken classes in psychology, and he thinks of himself as a clinical psychologist. Honestly, this is what I went through, and I was like, man, okay, whatever, I'm okay with this, but man, it really felt bad, and the people that I was supposed to be working with, when we were off duty, they were coming up to me, they were like, hey, just be patient. Be patient. He's not going to be here. Some would say he's not going to last long. They were like, someone's going to replace him, or just be cool. Don't worry. And these were people that had been there for a while. They were coming up to me and telling me, hey, we know it's fucked up what he's doing to you, but just be patient. It'll be all right. And this is the real deal. So my first dealings with this guy, that's what they were. And I don't know what it was. I had, I was a believer in Christ, but I wasn't in the Word. If I'd have been in the Word, what it was that happened next would have never happened. But unfortunately, I couldn't. It got to the point where I couldn't handle it. Like I needed to talk to somebody. I was raised in an environment where it was nigger this, nigger that, and my family that were, they'd brag about, my great grandfather being in the Klan and all this things, you know what I mean? So I was raised in that environment, and there was something that happened to me when I was in elementary school. In sixth grade, we had one black boy that was in our whole school. His name was Michael Carter. He was in my class, sixth grade, and he's standing there around this desk, the school desk, and it was myself, Michael Carter, and two other kids. I see the kids all the time in my mind, but I can't remember who they were. Though I do. Right now, I think I know who they were. But I don't know what it was that I said that hurt Michael Carter so bad. But when I said it, I realized that I had said something that I just only said because I had heard it said so often by my people that I was raised with. You know what I mean? It just, I just, it was like a like an automatic, like reaction, like what you would like if, like what's it called, like when you get that test and they tap you on your knee, like a knee jerk kind of like, I mean, it's like a reaction, and it came out of me when I said it. I don't know what I said. To this day, I don't know what I said, but I felt, I'm going to let you know in Jesus' name, God caused me to feel that kid's pain. And it's like time stood still at that moment. And I felt this kid's pain, and it was horrible. And
inside I was dying, man. And I begged God. I said, please help me. I don't want to be like this. Because I realized that it was people I was around, that I was just projecting what they had put on me. And I repeated it. And it was horrible. Then the next thing I know, my dad worked at a cement company in Wampum, Pennsylvania, Medusa Cement Company, and there was a black guy there. His name was Ernie Johnson. My dad introduced me to him, and then it ended up Ernie was my mentor, another mentor of mine. He would take me night hunting, with dogs, and he helped me to. I learned how to train and run dogs, coonhounds, and I spent a lot of nights with Ernie, and I had the utmost respect and love for Ernie Johnson. And he was the first black person, in my life, and he was a godsend. Why I bring this up is I had never met anyone like Stanley Beauchamp, and I got involved with this black girl that worked in this hospital squadron, a fellow service member, Air Force member, and we ended up getting married. Stanley Beauchamp, man, all through this with this, I'm dating her. He is fucking on me, man. Every time he'd get me alone, he would fucking just like trap me, and he would say things like that were like he was always like, "Yeah, Makosha, I've had." This is the way he talked. He was from Kentucky, and he'd say, "Yeah, Makosha, I've had I've had Japanese pussy. I've had Filipino pussy. I've had German pussy. I've had all kinds of pussy." But that black pussy, it's the best, ain't it, Yamakosha? Huh? Is that what it is with you? That black pussy? Now, that's light. The kind of way that this guy would treat me, um, I really can't convey, because I'm not going there. If there's no way that I could convey, like, bring you down to the kind of level where it was when he get into his tirade, tirades about how he hated whites, and like he would say things about O.J. Simpson in the movie The Klansman was his favorite movie, and that was the kind of thing he this whole thing with me being with this black girl, this fellow service member, really pissed him off, and like there was no talking to him about it. I mean, he just was all over me about it. And the thing is, you don't know. It's like I don't know. I'm being real light about this, but it was so bad, and I had nobody to talk to about this fucking guy. And I thought, well, you know what? I had nobody. I was with a detachment. My headquarters was at Lackland, San Antonio, Texas. I was in Eltis, Oklahoma. I don't know if, looking back, yeah, I would have reached out to them instead of what I did. What I did was I went to base social actions about it. The base there, Eltis Air Force Base, had a social actions unit. Oh man, what a mistake that was. The CO over there, his name was Captain Ayers. And I knew it, man, from the moment I walked in there that social actions wasn't for a white person going in about a complaint about a prejudiced black person, because it was so set up entirely for blacks, to that have complaints against whites. That's the way it was, and I was naive to think anything different, I guess. But Captain Ayers, man, he was like I was talking to an enemy and trying to convince him to be my friend. And my enemy is a wall, because there was no way I could penetrate him. Like couldn't he had nothing for me. Then when I got back to my detachment, Sergeant Beauchamp met me, and he was waiting for me, and he says to me, Airman Kosher, I'll say it the way he said it to me, Airman Kosher, I just got off the phone with Captain Ayers. He said you were over there saying bad things about me. Captain Ayers and I, we've been good friends for a long time. I'm paraphrasing. He may have said Captain Ayers may have said is a good friend of mine, and he switched it around a little bit. I don't remember exactly how it went down. All I know is that I was like, man, what have I done? I talked to my aunt, about it in a phone conversation. She lived to where I live now in District 17, Pennsylvania, and she said, she said, I know our congressman here. I'll talk to him for you. Now, at the time, I didn't say anything, but I'm thinking red flags are going up. I'm like, that might not be such a great idea. I got to thinking about it like 3 weeks after I had the conversation with my Aunt Omi, Leoma Swetlik. I called her Aunt O. Um, and I said, Aunt O. I called her back. I'm like, Aunt O, forget about what I said. I said, I really I don't want any trouble here. She said, Jimmy, I already talked to him. So then I'm thinking, what's going to happen? Congressman. I didn't even think about a congressional inquiry because I didn't know what that would lead to. I didn't know what a congressional inquiry was or anything. I'm like, I didn't know. I didn't know where it was going to go. But I'm thinking, this can't be good. Now, that might have had something to do with what happened next. Now, I ended up, look, things were, okay, a couple things happened. Beauchamp had black friends around the base and also with the hospital squadron. They made my wife at the time miserable and caused a lot of problems between us. We ended up separating because of the pressure they put on our relationship. Ended up getting a divorce. I can tell you we left amicably, meaning, I've been with my wife now for 33 years. I love her dearly. But there was a few years ago, like 10 years ago, Sherelle called me and, she was like, let's get married again. It's like we didn't leave on bad terms. Almost ruined my marriage of then 20 some years. Like I didn't leave on bad terms with her. It was the bad situation we were in. Thank God that I didn't, my wife, that I didn't fall into, betraying her that way. That's it. I didn't. But the thing is, so I went through this divorce, and as this was all happening, at the same time, I'm thinking, what's going to happen with this this congressman? Is there going to be somebody that's going to come here and check on it? What? Anyway, I was really dedicated to the work that I did for the Air Force. I had a lot of ambition and whatever talent. I knew how to direct my talent to get noticed. I'm just going to let you know. I was noticed and then awarded for being the best that the Air Force had in my AFSC. Um, I was awarded that. I was able to become an NCO without having to go to the NCO school. And because I was told that they were cutting orders for me to serve at the Pentagon in honor of just being awarded as the best that the Air Force had in my job, my AFSC. So, I was about ready to go to the Pentagon and serve at the Pentagon. And all I could think was, man, I'm going to do everything I can to, get noticed, and I might even be doing work for the president. I was excited about the whole thing. And just around that time, that congressional inquiry then hit the base, just after hearing that news. And I went from being like at the pinnacle, as an enlisted man where I could be. My future looked pretty bright. You know what I mean? It couldn't have been brighter. and they did something, whereas two airmen, Airman Bemis and Airman Dallaire, they were probably told to do this by Beauchamp or, my unit, because to set me up in the shop and have me removed from my detachment and had me assigned to prisoners, working with prisoners on the base. Now, why did they do that? You're thinking, what would the congressional inquiry have to do with that? Here's what it has to do with that. I was told that my base commander, Colonel Hazeltine, was passed over for brigadier general because of the congressional inquiry. That's what they told me. That he was passed over because of the congressional inquiry about the social actions issue with me. I'm not making that up. That's what it was, okay? Now, when I was told that, I was like, damn, I see it, but I'd done work for Colonel Hazeltine, and working relationship, professional relationship, is it's part of the reason why I was awarded, for being the best that the Air Force had in my AFSC. It was work that I had done for him. We had just gotten the C-17. It had been our base had been awarded with, was going to be the training base for C-17, Altus Air Force Base, MAC, Military Airlift Command. So I was like, I'd done a lot of work for Colonel Hazeltine, a lot, important kind of stuff, that got me noticed. I'm thinking I didn't think vindictive, like, is he doing this? Is he behind us? But then listen to this. They spent, it seemed like a couple months, me working in the shittiest kind of assignments on base, and they bring me back into the job, my detachment, every, like, so often to downgrade me, like, off of tasks, like things that was, like, I was a specialist, like I said, for lettering retirement certificates and award citations, shit like that. I was a lettering artist. And there's a mechanical lettering that's called Leroy lettering. And they brought me in there and had me do Leroy. And I was never good at Leroy. My skills as a graphic illustrator, I didn't even have to go to tech school, because my portfolio and what I had learned studying at a vocational school, I was, I'm saying I didn't need their training. So I never got to do Leroy lettering at their, that's the only thing, some shitty mechanical lettering that I would, nobody wanted that for their retirement certificates. They wanted the lettering I would do, the hand lettering, the calligraphy, but do you believe that they used that, testing me on Leroy? They did other things, but this is one I'm just highlighting. Like, they had me do it, and they tested me to see if I was proficient in it, and then by downgrading me from that, they were able to affect me somehow with my records, to make it look like I was somehow, the little things like that to make me look like I was incompetent. But whatever they backdated and fabricated, it took them time. Well, while I was out there doing details like cleaning out barracks, carrying out the old mattresses and shit from barracks, you know what I mean, when they was remodeling them. That's the kind of work they were having me do, or picking up cigarette butts out at the front gate, and shit like that. Whatever the hell it was. All kinds of shit details is what I'm saying. They were putting together whatever they could to try to justify, firing me. But I knew that that's what they were doing. I intuited that. No one told me that, but I knew that's what was happening. But I had no access to anybody. They restricted me to base, but I wasn't in jail. I wasn't a prisoner, but I was assigned to work with the prisoners. This is true. My last duty assignment, that's when my headquarters was at Lackland Air Force Base, but they had me assigned to base headquarters, where Colonel Hazeltine was the commander. I was under his command, my last duty, and that's where they had this staff sergeant that was stationed in front of me. His duty was to make sure that I did not slouch, but that I was ordered at attention to sit at attention in this chair in front of him, this wooden chair. Now, I haven't mentioned this, but I had injuries that had happened when I was in the Air Force that were serious spinal injuries that led to my having to have 2 spinal fusions. And I was ordered to sit at attention with those raw injuries to my spine. And I told them that. And they wouldn't let me go to the hospital or anything. Now, for me, it actually was torture. But I think that for anybody that is ordered to sit at attention, and here's the thing, you can believe it or not, but it's the truth. I lost track of the days that I was seated at attention, and I realized that I had lost track of the days, and then I had this epiphany. I was like, this must be because I felt it. I didn't when I say I felt it, I recognized it that something snapped, that I had crossed a barrier or something in my mind because it took so much for me to do that. I had to convince myself that what I was doing was duty, and uh, the guy that was assigned in front of me, this black staff sergeant, he knew my wife, ex-wife then now, and he, because of his prejudice, he didn't like me. The first sergeant, I'm talking about first sergeant of the base command, he didn't know me. And he treated me like I was a shitbird, because all he knew is whatever they told him, and I don't know what they told him about me. But no one had any leniency or mercy for me, man. And, I told them, I said, I got injuries to my spine, when I was given permission to speak. I said, I can't do this. And they told me, they said, well, if you don't do it, we're giving you a direct order. And then I knew what time it was because they said, you'll be given a dishonorable discharge. So it wasn't like they were beating on me. They weren't beating on me, but they didn't have anything on me. And I knew I could beat it if I could have. If I, He just kind of took the fight out of me. I guess it was just what I went through. It was a bit too much, I guess, where I lost my, my eyes are fucking burning because it's goddamn sugar. The VA has had me wait going on 8 years. I've needed hip replacement surgery. 8 years. It has ground me down, man. I wasn't, I became insulin dependent because I've become so inactive because of this pain from the needing hip replacement surgery. They stalled me. It's going on 8 years. Would you believe that? So, I guess I'm thinking as I was there, seated at attention, the where I was, my detachment. I knew I had them. If I want this, man, I've got it. It's just a matter of how whatever legal processes I have to go through. I said, I knew it. I'm like, but then I'm just thinking about the fighting, and I'm thinking where I couldn't see myself being somewhere else. Like, would they station me somewhere else to fight this? And I thought about being with them after what they had done to me, and knowing that I didn't have anyone there, like I was all alone. And I don't know, it just, you lose, I didn't, it didn't, it didn't, it didn't seem like it was worth fighting for. After a while, it didn't seem like it was worth fighting for. I wish I could have, even after, because they had the way that things went so badly, because I went through that divorce and I was left, with hardly anything, except my bicycle and some clothes. But they had taken all my stuff out that I had when they took me out to the front gate, when I agreed to sign whatever they wanted me to sign. My bicycle was waiting for me on outside of the gate. I was like, wow, that's wild. They took my bike and put it on the outside of the gate, for me to ride away on. And they told me I was banned then from the base because they thought that I would be vindictive, I guess, because of what they had done to me. Now, the first shirt, in the Air Force, it's the first shirt, not a first sergeant. The first shirt that was over the torture at the base command, when he had that clipboard with that paperwork for me to sign, he leaned over to me and he said to me, like, seemingly it was sincere. I questioned it because after what they had done to me, it was hard for me to trust, like, man, it was bad. But he said, you don't have to sign this. Like, he made me think that maybe he was beginning to see, that maybe what was being done to me was wrong. I don't know. But look, I'm telling you this because that's, I said to, both the Biden administration and now the Trump administration, if you'd see the thread, I've been sending President Trump, I've sent him so many communications asking for a fair and just result. Consider that, after all of this that I've been through, and I said, especially being surveilled over this multi-billion-dollar disaster that was hidden, and my having the irrefutable evidence that, actually I tried my best, contacting everyone, Justice Department, State Department, every, congressman, senator, the state attorneys general, the local AG, everybody. I've contacted everyone and shared with them what I shared here and more, I said, after all this, I said, and I know I haven't mentioned this, but I also lived up in, well, my wife and I, of 33 years, my wife, Norsiva, and we lived up in New York City for over a decade. We moved up there. And, good Lord. I had the spinal fusions, and I had to have them done outside of the VA because the VA turned me away. I've taken a polygraph about that because I waited years to file for any compensation. And, I needed a buddy statement about something that happened, and, then when I did talk to a polygraph examiner, a former government, like a polygraph examiner to help me, but he wasn't there for me. It's like he would do it for me. He didn't shine any liking me until after it was determined that I wasn't lying. You know what I mean? But one of the questions, because when he interviewed me, I was telling him I turned me away. I needed to hit the two spinal fusions, and the VA turned me away. They interviewed me and turned me away. And he said, and then he ended up asking me about that with the polygraph. I guess he didn't believe me. But yeah, they turned me away. But anyway, why did I mention up there? Hold on. Oh, thank you. The good thing is, I recorded also the most complete World Trade Center attack video that's ever surfaced. Um, it's like in the life in the like in the day, like it's a day in the whatever, I can't remember how it is, that it's like an adage. But it was like I had my video camera the whole night before the attacks, carried it with me. I stayed up all night, and then I had it with me, and I was making a short film in the early morning, like keeping my hand in the creative process. And I'm having breakfast with my neighbor, and then we get word from a friend of his that the North Tower, that a plane had flown into the North Tower. Then I went up on my fire escape and captured the South Tower, the plane flying into it, and everything else, all the way through, both of them going down, and then meeting my wife in Hoboken that afternoon when Building 7 went down. Right at that time, I was over there, saw the plume from that building, but I met my wife coming over on the New York Waterway, the ferry, because everything else was closed down. See, I was on the phone with her as I was recording the video, and I was trying to convince her, like, come home, because I told her, I'm like, everything is going to be shut down, the tunnels, the bridges. I said, you got to get out of there. But I was powerless, able to get her out. But you see, I captured that 9/11 chronicle, and when I waited a decade to release it, and it was kind of suspicious, I think, when I released it, and I was monitored, then by the National Security Agency. It drew a lot of attention, uh, and I think because when they took over my Facebook page and my YouTube, I think they use it even now for anyone that's interested in seeing anything about that. It's like if there's any, they can, you know what I mean? It's like almost like a way that they can monitor and find out people that maybe are a little bit too interested in that kind of stuff. You know what I mean? But I was monitored over that, and there was probably a background check and everything that was done on me then. And I said, I know that ever since I released this video of this massive multi-billion-dollar disaster here, that the evidence about the illegality and the criminality of that, I said, there was a background check done on me. So I said, and there was no formality in my having my civil liberties stomped on, where I can't even contact anybody, being heavily surveilled and monitored. I said, so could you do me a favor and drop the formalities and look into my military records and give me a fair and just result for what was done to me while I served our nation honorably with distinction? And without them telling me, like, what, if ever they would, what they were going to do for me, I asked them, I said, I think that retirement status, I would like that. Retirement status from the date of discharge from the United States Air Force, which is July 26th, 1989. And then I thought about the pay grade. No, not just, a box sergeant, but, I'm thinking E8. I said E8 sounds good to me. E8 over 23 years with back pay from the date of discharge. Now, I told you that I was awarded as being the best that the Air Force had at that time, the best that they had in my AFSC, and that all this is all. There are different sets of records. My command at Lackland Air Force Base, the 1365th Audio Visual Squadron, there should be a complete record of them. They were in talks to have they were working on getting my orders for me to work at the Pentagon to serve in honor of my being awarded, being the best that the Air Force had in my AFSC. So if I would have gone to the Pentagon without them doing this to me, what they did to me, if they wouldn't have done what they did to me, I believe that I could have gone as high as the ceiling was as an enlisted man, but I'll settle with, an E8 pay grade. And I say over 23 years, yes, because I probably would have stayed in over 23 years. But that doesn't take into account, that I would have gotten out of the service and probably worked in a GS position, making a shitload of money there. So my asking for what I have is not unreasonable at all. If I had a Trump attorney on this, for what I just told you, don't you think I'd have a $100 million fucking lawsuit with this? For the secret virus program being used, in that program alone. Don't you think so? I don't know if I mentioned this enough, emphasized enough, but my being a high school dropout, I think that had something to do with me being chosen for that. They probably, if you would look at who it was they selected, they might have been all high school dropouts. Like, what is a high school dropout? When I say that, you think about you can't help but think about somebody that's worth a lot less than somebody that is a graduate, right? You think about somebody that drops out of high school. That's just the way it is, isn't it? Our prejudice against anyone that would, drop out of high school for whatever reason. I'm sweating, man. I think my sugar's dropped down low. But that's all I've got to say about that. The vectors. A little bit deeper than a vector, huh? Yeah.